And now we're going to move on very quickly, because we're running a little bit behind time, to our next topic, a very specific subject around digital subscriptions. Now, we heard earlier how these are a critical component of a consumer revenue strategy, and we're going to get some expert advice on what your strategy should be. And to do that, I'm delighted to welcome to FIPP Insider one of our regular contributors and a FIPP sponsor to talk about this. Matt Lindsay is the president of Mather Economics. Mather is the leading expert in data and strategic insight in digital subscriptions. And today, Matt is going to tell us what your subscription strategy should be. So Matt, welcome and take it away.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And first of all, thank you for having me. And thank you to Press Reader for having me as well. It's always great to be here. I've certainly enjoyed our collaborations with Press Reader at several clients, and then also with FIPP in these conferences. So great to be here. I pride myself on being on time, so I'm going to try to do this in the allotted 20 minutes. And so if there's any questions or anything, please feel free to shoot me a note afterwards. I'd be more than happy to share this document afterwards. So, and also feel free to shoot any questions we have during the during this meeting, if that's possible. So, I'll skip over the credential slides. Just to suffice it to say, Mather Economics works with a lot of publishers all over the place, including New Zealand, and we have a lot of expertise around subscriptions. So, and again, just open door policy. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So the topics I'd like to cover today are kind of just a highlight of 7 kind of best practices we are seeing in the subscription space now, and recommendations we generally would give publishers. Specifically, some case studies around these areas of the life cycle: acquisition, engagement, and retention. And then I'll talk a little bit briefly about some of the things we have coming up, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A towards the end. So just to jump to the punchline, the 7 areas that we usually kind of recommend people focus on with their subscription business is by and large, first and foremost, look at the content. What is the product that you're selling, and what content is resonating with your core audience? Because those are the ones that are going to ultimately subscribe. One of the wonderful things about the digital platforms are that you do have a lot of data to do some analysis of both your audience and your content. And so our next point there is just make sure you're capturing the right data on your business, also print and digital products. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The second or third one is registration and paid content. One of the things we like to stress is that a known reader is many times more valuable than an unknown reader or an anonymous reader. So we actually, paywalls get a lot of attention, but we are actually big proponents of just registration walls. So if you can get someone to identify themselves, that's really the first step in the journey. We are known for pricing subscriptions, and so we're big advocates of strategic pricing, and that can be done in a way that's consistent with your overarching strategy. So don't feel like you have to do any steps that are in any way not consistent with what your values are. As an economist, I always talk about different pricing strategies, and sometimes people think I'm a terrible human being for advocating some targeted pricing, but it really is a win-win offering that you can make. It's better off if you have readers that may be priced out of your product, if you can charge them a little less, and then conversely, people that would pay a lot more for your product than you're currently charging them. Customer lifetime value is certainly a wonderful framework for making a lot of decisions around how you allocate your resources, whether they be acquisition resources or retention or otherwise. Churn propensity is another wonderful aspect of you can actually observe customers' behaviors and do some proactive retention campaigns that does wonders for your churn. And what we often talk about is there's an equilibrium number of subscribers that you can have. We're doing a lot of work around sustainable digital subscription models, and one of the big factors is what's your subscription capacity given your current audience, digital audience. And so churn is one of the big factors there that will dictate how many subscribers you will ultimately sustain. And then another, going back to the pricing point, the high digital price point, that's often sometimes when people have digital products, they tend to have a lower price because there's a perception that, well, I'm not printing this or delivering this, and therefore I have less cost involved, so I should price it lower. And that's actually not always the case. What we find is that digital subscribers are often willing to pay as much as print subscribers are. They're really perceiving the value of your content, not the platform that it's coming on. So moving right along. So the rest of these are some interesting just kind of case studies. So I won't go into these in too much detail, but I just wanted to share with you some of the interesting things we're seeing in the market. This is an analysis that we completed with a publisher around the different types of content that they had and what were the topics that were of particular value to their audience. And so we could see that we recommended that there were these changes in resource allocations, and it ultimately did result in monthly revenue gains from their digital subscribers. And it actually saved them some money because they printed net fewer articles than they had before. Going back to the kind of the data, so that was a particularly focused around content. The next point I had made about on the 7 list was around data. And so this is a scorecard that we have developed with Google and some others. Google is funding it, and I know that can be Google's a hot topic at the moment, but generally they are putting some resources into helping the industry. One of those was this project we developed with them, where we developed a really an effective number of metrics and scorecards. And so this is, again, a kind of a standard scorecard that you can use to look at your digital business and benchmark it against best in class publishers, as well as just the averages. So here was I talked about dynamic paywalls. So paywalls are really an effective tool, and you can do a lot of wonderful things with them. One is to really focus your sales attempts on people that are likely to subscribe. That's fairly common sense, but there's some caveats to that. And in the next couple of slides that I'll show kind of talk on that. Here, and going back to the fact that when you do propensity modeling, you can really have the most sophisticated algorithm in the world, but if you don't know who the reader is, you have so little data to make that prediction of their propensity to subscribe, that we found that your better strategy is actually to have a very tight paywall on your more likely to subscribe, which are your fanatics, but then ironically also have a very tight paywall on your anonymous readers, because you really don't know who they are. And what we found in retrospect is that a lot of people that convert off of those that are unknown are actually people that have been loyal readers. They just are not logged in at that moment in time. So we call this the rainbow strategy, primarily because we're not marketers. But there is a white paper here that you can read, and again, more than happy to share these white papers with you. Some of them are from the presentations we did, a masterclass with FIPP last year. So going back to the just to reinforce the importance of knowing who a customer is, we found that a known user is much more likely to convert to a subscription than an unknown visitor. And so again, more power to the registration walls. In these cases, we found that they're really an effective tool, and really a dominant strategy is like 1 or 2 articles for free. You must register, get another 1 or 2 articles, and then you have a paywall. This is kind of an intelligent paywall, another case study. And so there is indeed some benefit. So when we talk about that rainbow strategy, we're not necessarily saying that you should have one size fits all, but you can do some wonderful things with a paywall. Personalization is one of them. You can tailor the communication and the writing and the copy and the theme of the offer to a particular user. You can see here that we looked at the gains in subscriptions from COVID. Again, you want to also take advantage of surges in the news. So you can see that here they had this pre-COVID trend. COVID actually led to a significant jump in subscriptions. The intelligent paywall launch added some more. And then, obviously California wildfires last year were another big news story that led to a lot more subscriptions. So interestingly, we're also seeing a softening of demand for subscriptions now, because the news cycle is not quite as exciting as it once was for probably the betterment of society. But certainly big news sells. So here we want, this was from another really effective strategy we recommend, is premium content. So instead of not only just having a paywall, but also designating certain content as only available to subscribers. And we generally call that premium content. And there are ways we can help you identify what content lends itself to being premium. But we found that a hybrid strategy with some paywall for some content and then some subscriber only content really is the best overall strategy. In Europe in particular, they now have, not uncommon to have 35-40% of content is designated as premium. In the United States, it's not nearly that high right now. It's only about 5 or 10%, but it's growing. One interesting caveat, though, is that premium content will generally lead to incremental subscriptions. However, those customers tend not to retain as well. So it's important to have an onboarding journey for them. So here we talk a little bit about the next few case studies, or kind of this life cycle of the subscriber. And so you can have some really exciting case studies or use cases at all around this kind of acquisition, retention, pricing, upsell, reacquisition chain. Pricing is one of them. So here we talked about customer lifetime value being a wonderful framework. Here we used customer lifetime value to identify the optimal acquisition price. This is actually a European publisher, and they had an acquisition price of about €950 a month. We actually found that, that they had a price of $14.50. We actually found they could actually drop their acquisition offers profitably, and they subsequently moved it to $950, and we validated that worked better with A/B testing. Here we actually looked at the effect of personalization. I mentioned that's kind of a really effective tactic. This is a case study where we actually changed the copy so that it actually it mentioned their content preference in the offer. And so if there was someone that had read a lot of crime stories, we mentioned crime in the subscription offer, and it does lead to a pretty significant growth in conversions. This one is a Spanish case study. This was from El Espectador in Colombia in Latin America. And here we had a targeted retention campaign. So we look at their activity of readers. And what we found is that it's really not necessarily the average level of engagement that's important, but it's deviations from patterns. So in this particular case, we found customers who were disengaging in the sense that their whatever content level engagement they had before, we had noticed a significant drop. And so we proactively sent them an email, and this was the email we sent, and it actually reduced churn quite a bit. And lastly, let me just make sure. Yeah, I skipped one of these. So we found that there was going back to kind of the pricing. So digital subscription pricing, there's a life cycle that goes on long. And as I mentioned, last year's news cycle was so powerful that we found that a lot of publishers were just bringing in subscribers very quickly. And now those subscribers are now reaching their anniversary. And so we're getting a lot of questions of, well, what should we renew these people to? How do we hold on to these subscribers? What should they be paying? And so we've done a lot of pricing tests. And in this example here, this is fairly common. What we found is that $1 a day, 99 cents a day, is actually a really, it almost always is the right price. And this, again, we would tailor this to your particular product and geographical location. But in the United States, this kind of $1 a day for it depends on the frequency of your product, obviously, is really and it's surprising a lot of publishers how much pricing power they actually do have. That being the case, we do find that there are indicators of a customer's price elasticity. One of them is tenure. This is an A/B test where we actually gave we had two groups. We had a control group that had no price increase, and we gave there was a group that had a price increase of kind of an across the board 5% increase. And what you see here is that the groups in blue, these are the stop rates, that the people that got the price increase that were in their first year of subscription had about a 9% incremental stop rate, whereas people that were in their fourth and fifth years and higher had a far lower stop rate. So again, pricing, you can use whatever insights you'd like, but certainly tenure is a big factor. People in their first couple of years are much more fragile. And so we often will recommend having less of an aggressive price increase then, and perhaps holding off on those increases until they've been with you for quite some time. This just gives you an example of what a histogram of price elasticity looks like for subscriptions. It's not uncommon to have quite a distribution, and that's indeed what we're seeing here. This was you can see the average, and then the high elasticity to the right. Those were the people that you would give low increases to, and then the more significant increases to the people on the left. And this is a distribution of what an actual differentiated price looks like. And then here you can see what's happening. This is some benchmarks for digital subscriptions. We have a benchmark report, and you can see that there's been a clear trend where digital subscribers are paying more. Again, for a sustainable digital subscription business, it's not only the volume of subscribers, but how much revenue you're getting, and certainly an average, a higher price makes that much more sustainable. I won't go into these. I just kind of wanted to include them at the end here. These are some white papers that have some tactics. I think they're available on our site, and I believe they're also available on the perhaps on the FIPP site as well. We also do a lot of benchmarking, and I would just offer that we are in the process of developing a magazine benchmarking report, and would certainly love to talk to anyone that's interested in participating. Generally, we anonymize the data. There's no one could actually see your data, and you have to give the data to take part. So fair warning on that. Anyhow, any questions, please feel free to contact us. I'm hoping I'm under the allowed there. I have a big record I'm trying to maintain, so please feel free.
As ever, you're spot on time as usual. Perfect timing. We did start a little bit late, and we finished a little bit late, but we're 20 minutes in, so that's absolutely fine. Just a reminder for everybody's watching that you can ask some questions about. I've got a few to ask you, Matt, here. If you wouldn't mind stopping your screen sharing, and then we can, then we can ask you. A reminder for everybody watching that you can watch a webinar that we recorded with Matt, drilling into pricing strategies using the Atlantic as an example. That we did that last year. The link is in the chat if you want to do that. So while you're thinking of your questions, let me ask you one straight off about free trial. What's your view on the effectiveness of free trial as an acquisition tool for digital subscriptions?
Well, generally we typically don't recommend free trials. We depends on the context, but I know that there are some places where there can be used, but generally we find that a free trial ultimately is not necessarily effective. We do advocate perhaps some low price trial offers for long periods of time, like some of the publishers in the US are having one payment of 99 cents for up to 6 months. And so it's effectively free, but it does give you that information of the payment information as well as the email address typically.
So it's important to get the consumer transacting with you in any form, even if it's only a very low value amount.
Exactly.
A question here from one of my colleagues. Do you think it's possible for any media brand to transition into a subscription business? Are some more suited than others?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and I could probably talk for 20 minutes on that one. So I'll suffice it to say that it really depends on a number of factors. One is your audience. We find that general interest publications will generally have broader audiences, but they'll convert a smaller percentage. More niche publications will have a smaller audience, but they'll convert a higher percentage. So it's really where does your publication fall on that spectrum? And then there are some tactics that we recommend that will grow that potential number of subscribers that you can ultimately, acquire and retain.
And a kind of a question more specifically around pricing and first-party data. Obviously, first-party data strategies are a kind of crucial component in every publisher's business now. But when they're looking at that first-party data portfolio that they might have, or database that they might have, which are the kind of key data points that can help them with pricing strategy in particular?
So pricing, the most important variable we find is really tenure. Honestly, it's tenure is really that's probably the first thing we look at. The second is engagement with the product. The third is then tends to get into more kind of socioeconomic factors, just household income, disposable income, those types of factors. And so age, income, education. But again, it depends on the nature of the publication. For some niche audiences, people that are incredibly passionate about the content, doesn't matter how much income they have, they'll tend to stay subscribers.
And of the publishers that you work with, who would you kind of refer to as the kind of best in class, or maybe one of the best in class examples that people on this call could study?
Well, boy, that's a great question. I mean, there are such a variety of publications out there that are doing different things well. It's such a, there's obviously some, I would say The Economist, if I had to pick one that I think is doing a great job. I'm a subscriber. They're not a client of mine, so I'm not saying that for any, I have no incentive I would love to work for them. If they're on this webinar, please give me a call. But generally think they're doing great. They've really, I think one of the challenges with magazines digitally is that the format they have a really good app, and I think they're really doing some cool things with multimedia kind of audio and video and just really engagement with their audience.
And then just one final question from me on this question of subscription versus micropayments. Have you got any view on, first of all, on relative pricing strategies, if there are people looking at micropayments, and more broadly, whether you think micropayments are a good idea?
So micropayments have been tried by a lot of people, and I think there's always this sense that we're so close to the secret formula there. It's kind of like fusion. It's it's always there in the future. But I think that the micropayments generally are not ultimately a meaningful revenue source. However, to your point earlier, they do begin that transaction relationship, and so a lot of times they are valuable in that sense. They're kind of a lead generation tool.
And a data capture tool, I guess, because somebody has to give you their details. A question here from Philippa Jameson. Philippa, thank you for watching and thank you for your question. If your subscription offer is not just for a magazine, but also for membership to a charity organization, what's the best mix of subscription and membership offer?
Ooh, that's a good one. That is, as an economist, I always hate to say it, but it depends. And so I think it depends. We have a lot of people that are testing subscription offers where their portion of the subscription goes to a charity of their choice, and so they can actually pick local charities, and you can pick which one gets your revenue. So that's one tactic. There's memberships that we've seen for sure, especially in Latin American countries. There's a lot of big membership programs that are very effective. So again, I think that the optimal mix is a tough question. It is an effective tactic, though, to bundle charitable subscriptions and memberships with subscriptions.
Fantastic, Philippa. I hope that answered your question. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time. We're out of time on this session now, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know that it's getting a little bit late there as well, so thanks for giving up part of your evening to come and talk to us here on FIPP Insider New Zealand.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you again for having me.